The movie begins with Aisha Pradhan, the protagonist of the story, sitting on a couch, deep in thought. She tells her dad, Mr. Pradhan, that she felt like ending herself the previous night, but then his face flashed in front of her eyes. She then asks her father, what will he do without her? He tells her that one can't just put a full stop to their life. If she didn't want to get married, she could have just told him. He then asks her what's wrong with her. It has been 7 years since that incident. With tears flowing down her face, she says that yesterday everyone was happy around her, but she was feeling suffocated. She falls back on the couch and says that her whole life revolves around this one question: why didn't he show up? She cries, wrapped in her father's arms. She then asks her dad for 24 hours to go somewhere, away from all this chaos. Her dad asks her to cancel her book reading session in Delhi, but she replies that she can't run from her past any longer. The scene shifts to a train station. Aisha gets a phone call from her friend, Anera, who asks her why she broke off her engagement with Samir at the last moment. Aisha replies that she can't marry and can't make the same mistake again. Anera advises her to start writing her new book, but she replies that she is not able to write. Whenever she opens up her laptop, that question haunts her. The question is, if he loved her, then why didn't he show up? Anera tells her that the truth is that he never loved her. At this, Aisha gets angry and hangs up. Aisha gets on the train, and a few moments later, the guard arrives and makes a request. He asks her to change her two-berth cabin to a 4-sharing cabin. She agrees and is taken to a new cabin. There she meets a mother and daughter sharing the cabin with her. The woman introduces herself as Anu and her daughter as Pulti. Anu leaves for the toilet and asks Aisha if she could look after Pulti for a moment. After she leaves, Pulti tells Aisha that she got her name because she always makes mischief. When the train starts, she starts to scream and call for her mommy, but Anu returns and thanks Aisha for looking after her daughter. Later, Aisha leaves the cabin and goes out to think. There she finds a man smoking a cigarette, and she asks him for one. He hands her his own and says that she looks sad. She replies that it takes a sad person to know one. At the comment, a shadow passes his face and he leaves. Aisha gets back to the cabin and finds Anu on the phone with her husband. After the call, Anu starts taking out food. She asks Aisha if she was talking to Arjun, wasn't she? Turns out that the man in the corridor was once on television and is a famous singer. She then offers Aisha their lunch, but she politely refuses. At this, Pulti gets up and hands her a kebab. Anu is shocked at her gesture and comments that kebabs are her favorite and she never shares them. It seems like she likes Aisha. Then Anu tells her the story that she was visiting her sister-in-law in Mumbai and is now going back home to Delhi. She asks Aisha why she is going to Delhi, and she replies that she has a book reading session there. Anu then tells her about their home in Old Delhi and the fact that their area is known by the name of their house, Netaji's Manor. The name rings a bell in Aisha's brain, her breathing increases, and she sinks into her berth. We are taken back to the past, where Aisha visited Delhi with her friend Anera and a tour guide, Dev, who took them to their house, Netaji's Manor. Dev showed them their house while stating the facts about his home, which was built in 1858. He ends the tour with a traditional meal, made by his mom. During the meal, he tells them fascinating stories about their home, and Anera is truly captivated by him. Dev's sister, Renu, tells them that Dev has a PhD. He used to be a history professor, but left his job because of his love for old relics. Back in the present, Aisha gets out of the cabin and breathes frantically. The boys from their neighboring cabin, Arjun's friends, come out to discuss some old retro song. The song once again takes her to the past. Aisha goes to Dev and asks for his time. He apologizes because his walk is about to start, but turns out that Aisha is the one who booked it. He responds that she is completely crazy and she laughs. They both get in a rickshaw and make small talk. He tells her that this ability of his to talk about history is all due to his father. He used to take Dev to different monuments and tell him about their history. And even today, when Dev conducts these tours, he feels that his father is with him. They go on a walk around Delhi holding hands. They spend time together, click instantly, and start spending more days together. During these days spent together, they fall in love. After sharing a steamy kiss in a dark alley, he calls her his jailbay. Back on the train, she calls Anera, and after 30 missed calls, she finally calls back. Aisha tells her about the lady in the cabin with her, who is Dev's wife, her ex-husband's wife, and their 7-year-old daughter. At this, Anera tells her that Dev never loved her. He was always using her, but Aisha replies that her heart can't accept that he never loved her. Her mind doesn't accept that he could cheat on her. Aisha then asks the guard if he can change her cabin. He asks her for 10 minutes to check any available space and leaves. The train stops at the next station, and an elderly couple gets on the train with them. They get inside the cabin next to theirs and invite Pulti to come meet them. Aisha watches them from the door of the train. The man asks her wife to marry her in the next lifetime, and her answer takes Aisha back in time. Back in time when she asked Dev to marry her while standing in the street in front of his house. The whole area waited for his response. The guard arrives and informs Aisha that all the cabins are full and she can't be adjusted somewhere else. When he leaves, she looks out and thinks about jumping off the train, but she changes her mind and goes back inside. Anu talks to her about the old couple next door and how if it isn't for the marriages, living alone in old age would be very difficult. Aisha responds by asking her who told her that people don't feel lonely even after marriage. Anu agrees and says that she'll never let Pulti leave her. She then tells her about her husband, who normally keeps ranting about his home, but when he doesn't see Pulti, that same house feels like a jail. His home is where she and Pulti are because home is where the heart is. Aisha goes back in memory when after getting married, Dev brought her home. She was welcomed warmly, with open arms. The times they spent together when he begged her to wear something Eastern to meet the guests. Once, Dev's mom caught her smoking a cigarette and asked Dev to talk to her, but when he went into the room, they made love and had an incredible night. Later, while lying in bed, she asks a sleeping Dev if he thinks every love story has a happily ever after or not. He never replies. Back in the present, Aisha watches the moon through her window when Pulti shows her a birthday card, asking her views on it. The guard interrupts them, informing them that the fourth passenger in their cabin will board the train at 11:30 p.m. Anu is worried about who will be the fourth passenger and Pulti replies that it is going to be a surprise. Aisha is taken back to her and Dev's first quarrel, when she surprised him with her new job, and that finally, she would be able to get out of this old relic. In her response he says that this house, Old Delhi, and all of this is not just a job for him, but his whole life. This is who he is, and if he leaves this house, he'll never be hers. She asks him about his dreams, his dream of owning a travel agency, and he replies that whatever his future is going to be, this all will be a part of it. She comments that this might be his destination, but it is not hers. The train stops at a station, and the old couple next door flirts with one another. The man says some romantic poetry for his wife. With his voice booming in the background, Aisha gets back to her cabin but is stopped in her tracks when she sees Dev outside her cabin, holding a cake. At first, they both are too stunned to speak, but then she asks why did he do it. She says that he was cheating on her all the while they were together. She cries and says that she was wrong, he never loved her and she destroyed herself because of him. She throws the cake out of his hand and tells him to go enjoy the birthday party with his family. She shouts that she can't do this anymore and runs toward the door. Right when she is about to jump off the train, Anu opens the door, and turns out, all of this confrontation was Aisha's imagination, and they both were still standing in front of each other too stunned to speak. Dev enters the cabin, but Aisha stays out, the family reunion too much for her to handle. She holds the door of the cabin to balance herself, the air suddenly getting too dense for her to breathe. Inside the cabin, Pulti shouts with excitement because her dad brought her jailbus. Aisha is once again taken to the past, when Dev brought her to get jailbus on her birthday. This is when she tells him that she is pregnant, and Dev orders 20 boxes of jailbus in happiness. He dances with happiness and hugs her, but she drops the bomb on him by saying that she doesn't want a child so early in their marriage. She says that she is too young for this, she has a lot of things planned and this pregnancy will ruin everything. But Dev tells her that she'll be able to do everything. And also, they can't take away a life. He hugs her and says that they'll have a daughter and they'll manage it all. On the train, Anu introduces Aisha to her husband as the author of a best-selling novel. She then tells her about Dev, who owns a successful travel agency. The office is built right behind the manor, and the company is named Desha Travel Company, named after Pulti, whose real name is Desha. With tear-filled eyes, Aisha smiles and looks at Dev. Again, in the whirlwind of memories, we are taken back to the time when Aisha was heavily pregnant with their first child, and they were trying to come up with names for the baby. And one night, the name clicked. By mixing their names, they came up with Desha. They danced in celebration, and he distributed sweets among their neighbors. Dev and Aisha both are extremely happy for their baby. He pampers her with love and care, and the time flies by. In the train cabin, Aisha clicks a picture of the happy family and goes out immediately. Out in the corridor, she looks at the picture and then cries like crazy. Dev brings a piece of cake for her, and she throws it on his face asking if he couldn't have named his daughter something else. He replies that his daughter could be named nothing other than Desha, apologizes, and leaves. The next day Aisha is woken up by a curious Desha, who asks her why she was crying. Aisha replies that she was sleeping, not crying. Satisfied with the answer, she leaves with her mom for the toilet, leaving Aisha and Dev in the cabin. When she tries to get up from her berth, he picks up her slippers and passes them to her, an unspoken gesture that renders Aisha speechless. He asks why hasn't she married, and she snaps that it would have made things easier for him if she would have married. Before she could say something else, Desha and Anu return. In the neighboring cabin, the old man tells his wife that her silence irritates him more than anything in this world. To end her silence and lighten up her mood, he calls their son, who is in America, to talk to their grandson, but it turns out that they both are asleep. After a few moments, their daughter-in-law sends a video of the kid sleeping to them, which makes the old lady smile. In their cabin, Dev gets hiccups while eating, and to stop them, Aisha holds her nose. After the hiccups subside, Anu says that her mother-in-law also does the same trick to cure hiccups, a trick taught by some relatives. A flashback informs us that it was Aisha who taught them the trick to help with hiccups. They stop at the Agra station, and Desha asks his dad for some sweets. Both Dev and Desha leave to get sweets. On the other hand, a Sardar approaches Arjun and requests him to sing a song for his wife. wife. But he apologizes, saying that he has a sore throat and can't sing. Sardar requests but he harshly asks him to leave, so he leaves apologizing and saying that he just wanted to make his wife happy. Anu tells Aisha about a boyfriend she had before getting married. She used to love him more than one could imagine, but Dev never asked about her past. The day when she met him, she knew he was the one. Because he took Pulti in his arms and didn't even question the name of her father, all he said was that they'll call her Disa. We are taken back to the past when Dev entered his house. His mom slaps him and says that she told him to not roam around on his bike. He says that it is not the time for such talks and goes to his room. But she shouts from outside that God knows what they think about themselves. If only they would have listened to her, then Aisha would not have miscarried the child. Dev goes to Aisha and hugs her. She shouts at him that why did his mother blame her for the miscarriage when everyone knew that she wasn't ready. She cries in his arms, saying repeatedly that her baby wasn't ready. He tells her that these things happen, and at this she gets hyper. She snaps at him and says that they lost their child, not an insurance policy. She asks him then why was his mother telling everyone in the neighborhood, and now people have gathered downstairs to watch this charade. He asks her to stop dragging his mother into everything and making him choose between her and his mom. He leaves the room. She keeps calling him, but he never turns around. His mom also calls his name, but he gets out of the house without responding. Outside, he gets beaten up by a group of boys. When he gets home, he goes to bed without talking to anyone. Later, he tries going back to work, but nothing appeals to him anymore. On the other hand, Aisha keeps crying. After the loss of their child, their relationship starts falling apart. One day he wakes up and finds Aisha with her bags packed. She tells him that maybe every story doesn't have a happily ever after. She apologizes and says that this marriage was a mistake. She lost everything here, her self-respect, and her child, and now she doesn't love him anymore. She says that she wishes she knew how to survive without him and leaves. His mom tries to go after her, but Dev stops him. Aisha leaves Netaji's manor brokenhearted. Back in the present, she washes her face and goes to stand at the door of the train. She overhears Arjun talking to his friend about how he took his frustration out on poor Sardar. He apologizes, but his friend tells him that he doesn't need to be sorry. All he did was fall in love, which is not wrong, but now he will need to change the course of his love. He advises Arjun that when it is not possible to reach his destination, it is better to let it go at a beautiful turn. Aisha listens to this advice and is once again taken to the past. Aisha opens the door of her house and finds Dev, his mom, and his sister on the other side. They get in and her father leaves, saying that it is their family matter and they should decide what to do. Dev's mom gets up and sits next to Aisha. She says that it takes a lifetime to build relations and it is a woman's responsibility to save her marriage. Renu goes up to Aisha and says that they both love each other and they should stop acting like they don't. His mom advises them both to go to Kashmir on vacation to try to mend what is broken. Aisha is pulled back from her memories by the voice of Arjun singing a song. His voice mesmerizes everyone around, and they all get out of their cabins into the corridor to enjoy his singing. Aisha sees Dev with his family, with tears falling from her eyes. She remembers the time when she went to Kashmir and kept waiting for Dev, but he never came. Arjun ends his song, everyone claps and goes back to their cabins. The train finally stops at Delhi station, and Aisha sees Disa dragging Dev out of the train. She starts to leave but is stopped by Anu, who with tear-filled eyes, thanks her for giving her Dev. Turns out she knew all along who Aisha was. She says to her that Aisha might not want to meet her again, but she'll be happy to see her. She invites her to their place and leaves. Anu goes out and sees Dev standing still. She looks into his eyes, smiles, and nods. He leaves them and runs back inside. Back in the cabin, he finds Aisha sitting and crying. She looks up and finds him standing in the doorway, crying. He looks at her and says that he did come to Kashmir that day, looked at her from a distance, and fell in love with her even more. He tells her that he doesn't think he ever loved her more than at that moment. But when he looked at her and thought about her, he asked himself why she should be the only one making sacrifices. He asks her if she ever thought why did he start the divorce proceedings, because she was complete without him. He kneels down in front of her, saying that he realized his Aisha was better off without him, because one can't contain a sea in a well. He then says that he did read her novel, over and over again, and after reading it he realized that he wasn't her destination, but just a push to her flight. She ugly cries in response and tells him a story of two birds. One of them was made for the skies and the other for the cage. Both the birds fell in love, but even after many efforts the bird couldn't stay in the cage, nor could the other one soar in the skies, but their love never diminished. Aisha says that for years she was carrying the burden that he never loved her, but he replies that he never stopped loving her. He then says that he'll eagerly wait for her next book. They both smile and hug each other while the tears keep flowing. They get off the train, with Dev going to his family and Aisha going her own way. 1 year later, Dev passes a bookstore and stops dead when he sees Aisha's second book in the rack. The book is named Jailbhai, the story of Dev and Aisha.